Very good morning to everybody joining us today, and thank you for taking the time to attend today's webinar, Sample Collections, How to Prepare Your Donor and the Importance of Chain of Custody. My name is Eowyn Hanna and I'm the Sales Compliance Manager at LexTalks. Today I'm joined by Adele French, our Sample Collector Trainer here at LexTalks, and this is our second webinar in our bite-sized series. Little bit of housekeeping before we start. So all attendees have been set to mute. Reason for this is to reduce any background noise and to ensure that you can hear us clearly. This is a live broadcast, so unfortunately we won't be taking questions during the webinar, but if you do have any queries or questions, please do contact us via experts@lextalks.co.uk. Today's webinar will last approximately 20 to 30 minutes, and we will be recording today's session and we'll share a link post-event. So we shall begin today's session. I'll hand over to Adele to go through the agenda.
Thank you and good morning everybody. Thanks for joining us. So on the agenda today, we're going to talk through preparing the donor. So what you can do to prepare the donor on arrival and any preparation for hair, blood or DNA samples they may be having collected. We're going to talk through the sample collection process itself and the importance of sample collections. And then we're going to move on to the chain of custody. We're going to go through the importance of the chain of custody. We're going to run through the chain of custody form that we use, and we're going to talk through the questions we ask the donor at the collection.
So preparing the donor for a sample collection. At LexTalks, we share our guide to sample collection directly with you, our clients, with every sample collection booked, and this is done so via email. This can also be found on the adjacent link. Question we get asked frequently is, why do we take a photograph of the donor at our sample collection appointments? Now, this is part of our standard procedure that we have photographic evidence of the donor taken at each sample collection that we undertake. Now, this is important, especially if the sample collection is in regards to DNA. We need a photographic record of each participating donor so that the DNA report that we provide to you is legally defensible in a UK court of law. Furthermore, it ensures that we're providing proof that the right sample has come from the correct donor. The photo of the donor is then also included into the report issued to you, our clients. And I'll hand over to Adele to talk to you a little bit more about preparing your clients, our donors, for their sample collections.
Okay, so what we can do to prepare the donor for a sample collection. So on arrival, our sample collector will ask a series of COVID-related questions to continue to help minimize the spread of the virus. We will ask the donor some health and safety related questions in regards to the property we're attending. We'll also ask the donor if they have any medical conditions that we may need to be aware of before we collect any samples from them. So before any sample collection can take place, we have to be able to identify the donor. So our collectors will need to see some identification to ensure we're collecting the sample from the correct person. So this can be a driver's license, a passport. Photographic evidence will also be taken at the appointment though. So we are aware some donors may not possess any photographic identification at all. That's fine, we can still continue. Their identification can be verified by a solicitor, a social worker, or the witness present at the time of the collection. So the identity of a child or any children that are having samples collected from them should be verified by the person or party who has parental responsibility. So our collector will be made aware beforehand, a specific named person who has this parental responsibility, and it's essential that person is actually present at the time of the collection, as they're the only person who can identify the child or children. So part of the chain of custody procedure, the donors will be required to provide a signature. This is their consent to the sample analysis, and they will also be asked for a photograph to be taken of them. So It's really helpful if the donor can prepare a list of any medications that they're taking, so these can be declared at the time of the sample collection. With the medications, this can just be a list. We don't need any dosages or frequencies of the medication at all. A list is fine, and it should include any meds that have been given to the donor by a GP, from the hospital, any dental treatment, or anything they've just purchased over the counter at all. So, for example, from a chemist. This just ensures the prescribed medication is taken into consideration when they're interpreting the analysis results, and it's included in the expert report. So prior to a hair sample collection, what we can do to prepare the donor, it's really important to ensure they don't have any hair products left on their hair at all. So anything like hair gel, hairspray, oils, etc. It just makes it easier for the collector to obtain a sample, so when they're sectioning the hair or having to comb through the hair at all, and it just provides minimum discomfort to the donor. So with hair extensions, if the donor does wear hair extensions, they will have to have them removed prior to the sample collection. Our collectors are not able to remove extensions, and nor would they be able to collect an actual hair sample with the extension still attached, so they would need removing. So the collection itself, if a head hair sample is being taken, our collector will section the hair and they'll cut 2 samples of hair as close to the scalp as possible. We take approximately a pencil width of hair, so it's not just one strand of hair, we take a good lock of hair. However, there are cases where more hair may be needed. This is because the weight and texture of hair varies from one individual to another, so the collector would assess that as they're there. So move on to some visuals now. So as you can see, the left picture is just showing you how the hair is sectioned prior to the hair being cut. So the ideal location on a donor is posterior vertex, which is the crown. The next picture shows a typical sample size. So as you can see, it isn't just one strand of hair. It's not a large amount of hair, approximately 1 centimetre wide. It's about 100 strands of hair in each cut. So once the sample is taken, it would be placed into a glassine envelope. The glassine envelope is sealed with a barcoded sticker, which the donor would initial. And this is to meet integrity checks at the laboratory. It's also how we identify the samples.
Great, thank you, Adele. So if the hair collected is being tested for spice, psychoactive substances, legal highs, or steroids, we may need to collect more hair samples than the 2 hair samples Adele has mentioned.
Okay, and can I just ask why we need more samples for that type of testing, Wyn?
Yeah, of course. So there are occasions where we may need to take more than the 2 hair samples, and this is dependent on the combination of our client's test requirements. So for example, if we were requested to test for drugs, alcohol and steroids analysis, ideally and donor permitting, we would need to take 4 hair samples. If we were requested to test for drugs, alcohol, legal highs and spice, then ideally and donor permitting, we would need to take 3 hair samples. Reason for the additional samples is with certain testing combinations, more weight will be needed or may be needed for different types of testing. That answers your question.
Yeah, that's great, thank you.
And if our collector gets to the appointment and there is little or no head hair available, our sample collector can take a body hair sample. Now, in cases involving body hair, the sample size will vary depending on what we are required to test for you. And body hair is useful if no scalp hair is present. However, this is analysed as a whole sample, and the reported time period is a maximum approximate time period. Now, we can't give you that before going out and collecting that body hair sample. This is only calculated when that body hair sample is received at our laboratory and is assessed on where on the body that sample is collected from, the sample site, and how long that sample measures. And this is calculated by our experts in the lab. For alcohol analysis, we can still use body hair, but this must be taken from the chest, leg, or forearm sample sites only. With drug analysis, hair samples can be taken from the underarm, chest, leg, or arms, or beard hair, and we can undertake drugs analysis from any of these sample sites.
Okay, so we'll talk about now preparing the donor for a blood sample collection. So it's really important to note we offer 3 types of blood tests at Lextox. We offer a liver function test known as an LFT. We offer a carbohydrate efficient transferrin test known as a CDT. And we also offer phosphatide ethanol known as a PEth test. So we don't require a large volume of blood to be taken. So for example, if the donor was having all 3 of the above tests, it would be a maximum of 2 vials. It's only a small amount of blood we need for analysis. So prior to a blood collection, so this is not just for the donor, this is for anybody who's having a blood test at all. It's recommended that you drink plenty of water before a blood collection. It doesn't need to be an excessive amount of water. Drinking water basically increases the water concentration in your blood. So it's therefore hydrating the body. And what this does, it makes the vein plumper. So it's much easier to locate a vein. It's easier to extract a sample, and therefore makes it a much more comfortable process for the donor or whoever's having their bloods taken. So the actual collection of the blood. So our collection technician will assess the donor's arm or the back of their hand for a suitable site to draw the blood from. So what they're looking for a good sized vein and a decent quality to the vein. Based on the quality and size of the vein, they'll then select an appropriate needle. We use a vacutainer needle system to draw blood, where a needle's inserted into the vein, a vial is attached to the system, which then draws out the blood sample. So, for example, if we were taking bloods from a small, tricky vein in the back of a hand, we can use a small, fine needle. So there may be a small feeling of pricking or scratching as the needle goes in, but it shouldn't be a painful process at all. It's also good to note, if you know the donor is fearful of having their bloods, if they're a bit anxious or stressed out about a blood draw, it's really important they give their concerns to the collector at the time. Technicians have lots of experience in dealing with people who are needle phobic or anxious about blood draws. There's nothing they won't have dealt with before, and they'll have plenty of advice, plenty of tips and techniques they can use with the donor to reassure them and help calm their nerves before the blood draw. So moving on now to DNA sample collections. They're very straightforward collections. They don't require a lot of preparation. What we do recommend prior to a DNA collection is if you can advise the donors not to eat, drink, smoke, or chew any gum at all for 30 minutes prior to giving a DNA sample. So when the collector will take a DNA sample, what we do is we just need the donor to open their mouth as wide as possible, and we collect cheek cells with a swab. This is an exact swab that we would use, just a giant cotton bud basically. No discomfort to the donor at all. So we would swab the insides of the cheeks near the back of the teeth, and we'd rotate the swab at the same time for 20 to 30 seconds each side. And this is just to ensure we get a really good coverage of cheek cells on the swab.
So the importance of our sample collections. At Lextox, we pride ourselves on the expertise of all our sample collectors. Our team are trained to collect samples sensitively and sympathetically to ensure a minimal discomfort for the donors. The collection process itself is an integral aspect of the whole sample analysis process, and all samples need to be collected under strict chain of custody procedures to ensure the result is legally defensible for use in court. This is why we advise a donor should be prepared in advance as to what to expect during the sample collection appointments. We do have sorry if we could go back one. Thank you. We do have the client guide to sample collections available, and this can help answer questions in advance of Adele or one of our other sample collectors going out and taking samples from your clients, our donors. And this can act to alleviate any concern before their sample collection appointment. And as Adele has articulated, if people are a little nervous, then our team are able to put our donors at ease at the appointment itself. But it definitely helps if they are aware and can be prepared prior to the sample collection appointments. So next, we're going to talk to you about the importance of the chain of custody. So below and across the next few pages are the sections of our hair chain of custody, or COC form. We're going to explain each section and what the donor is asked during a collection and why we ask this information. So I'm going to hand over to Adele to talk you through each section of our hair chain of custody form.
Okay, thank you. So as Wyn just said, this is an example of our chain of custody form that we use for hair collections. So as we touched on previously, we always have to identify the donor. So section 1 is where we take the method of identification. We always take a photograph, and then we'd record any additional methods we've seen at the time of collection. Section 2 is as simple as it's read, the natural hair colour. Sorry about that, I've got a tech problem. So the donor just needs to declare their natural hair colour before they've had any alterations to it, any dyes on it at all. Section 3 is the sample site. So this is where we would indicate to the laboratory where the collector has taken the sample from. So whether it be the scalp hair, or if there's insufficient scalp hair and we move on to take a body hair sample, we need to indicate here where those samples have actually been taken from. Section 4 is where we ask the donor any chemical hair treatments they may have applied to their hair at all. So we're looking at things here like hair dyes, bleaching, perming, and then we need to give an approximate date of application of those chemical hair treatments. Section 5, this is where we ask the donor about any products or any thermal straighteners they've applied to the hair that's being collected. So products on a scalp hair, we're looking at things like wax, hairspray, gels, mousse. And then if we were taking any body hair, for example, we would be asking if there were any products such as deodorants on an underarm sample. Section 6 then, we only ask this question if drug analysis is required. So we ask the donor to declare any substances they've used and the approximate last date of use. Section 7, as I spoke about earlier, medications. This is probably one of the most time-consuming parts of the form. It's quite hard for people to remember every medication they've taken over a specific time period. So the list is always beneficial at this point. So this is where we need the donor to give us a list format, basically, of any medications they've been given from a GP, a hospital setting, a dentist, or anything they've purchased over the counter themselves. So, for example, a chemist. Section 8. So likewise to Section 6, this is only asked if we're testing for alcohol. Wouldn't need to be declared for just a drug analysis. So the donor would be asked to state their approximate units of alcohol they consume in a typical week. And then we'd select the relevant, most appropriate box. Section 9 is just for our use. It's where we enter our unique identifying reference number for the laboratory. And then Section 10 through to 12 are filled by the relevant parties. So Section 10 by the donor, 11 if there's any witness present, 12 is where the collector would give their statement to say they've collected the samples under the chain of custody procedures. Section 10 is probably the most important part of the form. This is where the donor consents to the samples actually being taken. So if the donor fails to give any consent to us, we wouldn't be able to take any samples from them at all.
Right, thank you, Adele. So to summarise, Section 1 is where we ID our donor, make sure we have the right person. Sections 2 through to 8 are information that help our reporting scientists and the lab interpret the results and prepare the report for you. Section 9, another unique identifier for us to use, and sections 10 through to 12 are where we require our signatories, with particular importance on section 10 with obtaining our donor's consent to test. So next we'll move on to the subsequent page of the hair chain of custody, and this is the back of our copy. I'd like to draw your attention to the middle section where we receive the sample in our laboratory and further integrity checks are carried out on the sample and chain of custody itself. So the chain of custody doesn't just stop at the sample collection. This is a continual process. The next page, which is our client copy, is a direct copy from page 1. This is carbonated paper. This will be a replication of the information given to our collector on page 1 and taken away as part of our chain of custody. Draw your attention to the pink barcodes on the right-hand side. These represent the sticky labels that Adele spoke of earlier when their cut hair sample is placed into a glassine envelope and also sealed in a tamper-proof specimen bag. These barcodes will be placed on those items and also initialed by the donor. And the sample number, the LX number on the stickers, will always match the sample number, the LX number, on the physical paperwork chain of custody itself. Before these even get to our collectors, a trained team of in-house experts will put together these packs and carry out the relevant quality checks before we dispatch those to our collections team. And finally, page 4, which is the back copy of our client copy. This details how you can get in contact with us. Address, phone number, email. Feel free to speak to us however is most convenient for you. It also references that we're ISO 17025 UCAS accredited and has our testing laboratory number present. And should you wish to have any CPD or training seminars delivered, then this is the same point of contact to arrange those through also. So next we'll talk to you a little bit about hair testing timeframes. So we can offer some expert advice around our testing timeframes, and this will cover body hair, scalp hair, growth rates, and what timeframe that you, our clients, are looking to cover specific to the case that you need. So body hair, as we discussed earlier, will be analysed only as a whole section and calculated as a maximum approximate time frame. This has a different growth rate to that of scalp hair. Scalp hair grows at an average rate of approximately 1 centimetre per month. So if we take, say, a 3 centimetre section of scalp hair, this can provide a retrospective profile covering approximately 3 months. Now, I'll point out at this time that with alcohol analysis, we will only offer this as an overview. With drugs, we have some different options. So for drugs, we can also offer segmental analysis or month by month. And this is looking at a month by month profile of drug use and is useful if you were trying to assess, say, a trend in use over that time period, for example, either to obtain an indication of any increasing or decreasing use. We will look at that 3 months and section that into 1 centimetre sections and look at it that way. Now, with an overview, this will look at a section of hair of up to 3 centimetres in length, covering a 3-month time period. And this will provide an indication of drug use within that 3-month period. Now, an overview analysis can be beneficial if you were just looking to see if there was an indication of usage, or perhaps cost is important and a constraint for your case. However, an overview analysis will not indicate decreasing, increasing use over a period or show that drug use within a particular month. It very much depends on what you're looking for, what you're looking to obtain through our testing, and we're on hand to help guide you through that process. Similarly, if you've had previous testing with us and you don't want to overlap the new set of testing, or perhaps you have a pending court date, our experts are able to guide you through and advise when is best to get that hair sample collected to meet your requirements.
Okay, so just to summarise everything we've talked about this morning. So the collection process is an integral aspect of the whole sample analysis process. A donor should always be prepared in advance as to what to expect during the sample collection appointment. So please do forward our PDF guide over to them in advance so they can prepare. It's really helpful to prepare a list of any medications the donor's taking, so these can all be declared at the time of the sample collection. Like Wynne spoke about, if the hair is being tested for spice, psychoactive substances, or steroids, the sample collector may need to collect more than 2 samples from the donor. So prior to a blood sample collection, it's recommended the donor or yourselves, anybody who's having a blood test, drinks plenty of water beforehand. And then we recommend the donor doesn't eat, drink, smoke, or chew any gum for 30 minutes prior to giving a DNA sample.
So this concludes today's event, and we'd like to thank you for your time again and for joining this morning's webinar. We do hope to see you at our next event, which is Reading and Understanding Drug and Alcohol Test Reports, and this will take place on the 8th of June at 10 a.m. Please do keep in touch. We have our website available. Email us at experts@lextalks.co.uk. Again, if you'd like to have a guide to our sample collections emailing direct to you, feel free to do so after this session and we shall get that over to you. Or via phone, however that's convenient for you. We also recently launched our new client app. So if you would like to use that service or have it as an additional option to interact with us, this is available on both Apple and Android devices. Get in contact with us. We'll do all the setup for you and we'll get you ready to start using this service. And we are also present on social media via the following links below. Again, we will share this session post live, and I'd like to thank you all again very much for your time this morning and for joining today's events.